Right, it's 4020 not live, 20th of October, 2020. The season continues, and global pandemics, mass unemployment. Leeds win Challenge Cup. As was ever thus. John Davidson is here. Phil Kaplan is also here. Name checks by Richard Agar in the post-match press conference, and apparently, Phil, Leeds are back, much like Bradford 18 months ago. Leeds are back. They're going to go on and dominate rugby league for the next 10 years again.
Well, with your introduction, I thought we were back in the 1930s. First time Leeds got to Wembley in 1936, I thought, that's the Jarrow March and all that kind of thing. The wheel has turned full circle. I guess there's one thing to say about the weekend, and that is that we all hoped it would be an occasion for the sport, which transcends too much looking at tactics and decisions and fortune and who it favours and all. Some pretty good television viewing figures. We got two ultimately committed teams. We got a great spectacle. I'm not sure we could have asked for much more, although clearly everybody other than the Leeds fans would say the only other thing that we could have asked for was them not winning. But in terms of what it was, it more than did the job. It more than justified the RFL using Wembley as the venue. The coverage was social mediaized here, there and everywhere. The underlying stories were picked up by all the various media news outlets, and it was a great occasion in what has been a truly traumatic year.
We had a different perspective, John, because we were watching on from home. Great spectacle. And I wonder if we'll be able to separate the spectacle from the game, because I don't think Phil's obviously there, and we'll get his view in a moment on the game itself. Obviously social media was split on this one. TV coverage seemingly suggests it was one of the great finals of all time. No. Social media saying it was rubbish. It was probably somewhere in between.
It wasn't rubbish. The first half I thought was pretty average. I think there was a lot of laying all over the ruck, and the fact that there was no 6 again call just made it very slow and pedestrian. I didn't think it was a very good first half, and obviously the Salford try, which was out of nothing, which was a moment of brilliance. That was great, but that kind of was probably it. And then the second half, obviously, I think things did improve, and the ending was very thrilling, and that was a great, that was very entertaining. But overall, as a great final, no, not in my opinion. I think on TV, there's an element of talking it up. You kind of have to sell it a bit, but is this one of the greatest finals ever? No. Is it one of the greatest finals in recent memory? No. It wasn't for me. I think there was a lot of mistakes, could have been chances that weren't taken, but that was just my take.
We've got to bring the negativity in, Phil, you see, because if we do too much positivity early on, people will be going, what's going on with this thing?
People don't like the truth. They don't like honesty.
But obviously you were there. You get a different perspective than we do at home. We're relying on what we see through the cameras.
I just think you have to pay credit to everybody that was involved, both on the field and all the backroom staff, all the people from the RFL that were there. They made an occasion out of something that was really, really tough. And Wembley is an unforgiving, huge, vast bowl of a place that it's really difficult to play in if there is nobody there. So I think part of the description of whether it was a great game or not is couched in the fact that for those who were there, they were just incredibly grateful for something taking place on that turf that was always interesting. It never deviated from the fact that you couldn't take your eyes off it. And I think when you factor all of that in to trying to play in such an enormous stadium with so much weight behind it, and to be able to come up with something like that, I just think it's a massive credit for all the people that were involved. It would have been so easy, the dampest of squibs. And actually, we haven't had too many great Challenge Cup finals in recent years. We most years we get to the end of one and go, oh, the new Wembley still hasn't had a great final. And yes, it's had some great moments. Tackle 52 will go down in history. But even last year's final, where Warrington outplayed St Helens. So although it was sort of relatively close in terms of the final score, if you were there, you sort of could tell the way the game was going right from the beginning. I think this one genuinely did go to the last penalty of the game. And both teams played the occasion really well, gave it the respects that it deserved, and hopefully that's what came across on the telly, and that's why it was great, because it could have been a blowout, it could have been having no atmosphere, or there were so many things that could have detracted from it, merely the circumstance of how it was played. But the truth was that for non-aficionado, generally watching sporting audience, it was great.
I'll just add too, I think Ian Watson was interviewed after the game on the BBC, and he said it wasn't a great game and Leeds grounded out. And yeah, he was right, because Ian Watson is a very honest coach. He doesn't have a moan if his team loses. So yeah, sorry Phil, you're not right there, but anyway. Yeah, Leeds won. You've been on the drink for 3 days, Phil. You're still drunk. Drunk.
I wish that would be so nice. Yeah, I'm still at the homecoming.
No homecoming this year, but you are going to arrange a 5, 10, 15-year anniversary, as Richard Agar said, so that'll be good. It's something to look forward to in the post-COVID world.
I think the best thing about it is the Rob Burrow thing. I mean, if that brought a smile and some happiness to Rob Burrow, who's obviously going through the toughest of times, and for him and his family, then that's a more than fitting thing, I think.
I think also the fact that the winning point forever will be associated with someone who was wearing his shirt number, and if you believe in the fates, or we all need something in this time of difficulty for all, but for him more than anybody else. It's something like that, and I think I sort of get what Ian Watson was saying. I don't think his team were able to play the way he would have liked to play. Now, whether that makes it a great game or not, I'm not sure. Certainly, in terms of grinding it out, absolutely, that's what Leeds did. There was no repeat of the semi-final against Wigan, where they sort of blew them away in the first half with expansive rugby that there was no answer to. That it was a very different way of winning a game. But I think if you're tuning in and you're not looking for the technicalities of what's happening, you wouldn't have turned it off. And I think that's all we can ask for in this time at the moment. And the one thing that it really is interesting is that since recall, I don't know what the stats are, but clearly to only have one set restart in the entire game is very unusual, and that would change the way the game is played for both teams. Why that happened, I'm not sure. What effect that had, who it helped, I'm not sure. But it certainly kept the game absolutely on edge till the very end. And Salford will rue the fact that perhaps they were a little bit more intimidated by the occasion than Leeds were, and maybe it just was down to getting in the right part of the field at the right time of the game to actually win it, and it was no more or less than that.
There is a theory in all sports, not just rugby league, that referees in playoffs, in finals, referee differently. I wonder if that was the case. I mean, already a sin binning at Wembley in a dog's age. Maybe that was something that came to play in the referees. Well, you don't know, but it was an interesting final. Loved the try from Rhys Williams. Almost reminiscent of Clive Sullivan, fellow Welshman, in the World Cup final in '72. Before we get on to say how great Leeds are and everything, I am famously close. It's like through gritted teeth, isn't it? I like Leeds. We know this.
Well, one thing I would say, and John obviously will have taken more interest in the nuances of the game from you will have seen it better on television than you do with one viewing live. Particularly, at Wembley, you are quite a distant field. But from what I remember, All of the Leeds tries came on a 6-tackle power play. And if I was Ian Watson, that's why I'd be disappointed that my team didn't react quickly enough to close Leeds down, not just once, but 3 times, moving the ball wide instead of kicking it on the last play. And again, that doesn't come down to the refereeing or the way in which the game was refereed. That's his players not realising that there's going to be an issue, not once, twice, but 3 times in a game. Again, it came down to a goal kick, didn't it? Reece Martins on the touchline went in off the post, and Christian Inu missed one from out wide. There's so many little nuances, but I think Ian Watson would be more annoyed with his own team not reacting than whether it was a great game or not.
I think you're right, Phil. I think if you're Salford, you're kicking yourself even more than the grand final last year because there was such fine margins. And as you said, I think all 3 Leeds tries came from a quick shift and just the numbers, basically the winger falling over, almost untouched. And that comes down to your edge defence and how you count your numbers and how you react. And you look at Salford, I mean, if Watkins puts that ball to Williams on his chest, they probably score. If Inu passes or he keeps the ball in contact and doesn't lose it right at the end, they might have kicked a drop goal, or they might have scored off the next play. They were literally that close. So I think that's going to be, that's going to burn for them because they had the experience of Old Trafford last year, and I think that would have helped them a lot on Saturday. But to go so close and to miss out again, that's a bit of pill. But I think, watching on TV at home, I still don't know. No one seemed to ask the question or answer for me what Gil Dudson was doing, pouring water all over his genitals before kickoff. I mean, I've heard of cold showers before, but is that, and face slapping? West used to do that in the 70s with Roy Masters. What was all that about, Phil? I know you wouldn't have seen it because you were at the game, but Rich did. What is that?
I'm guessing it concentrates the mind.
Is it a Welsh thing? I don't know. It was very odd. I've never seen that pre-match ritual, and I've watched rugby league for 35 years. It
didn't work, unfortunately.
It didn't seem to work. No.
He was getting overexcited before kickoff and needed to cool down.
You did. Yeah, like a cold shower. I guess. Different players prepare for big games. Some like to have a sleep. Some like from sex. I remember Anthony Mundine used to do that. I guess that's something different, something new.
It's nice to know that within 15 minutes this is totally degenerated. Thank goodness Ms. Carter isn't on.
I'm sorry. It's just like even the whole first half, I was still just completely. It was so bizarre. I couldn't stop thinking about it, why he'd done it. So.
That's why you didn't enjoy the game, you see.
Exactly.
That mental image was burnt in there right from kickoff.
I'm concerned because someone is quoted as saying straight after the final hooter in 2017 at the grand final that was it for Castleford, and they blew their only chance. Well, it might have been their only chance. I can't remember the exact words I said. And my concern. My concern now is for Salford that they've made it to 2 finals, as Castleford did then. The likes of Wigan, St Helens, Warrington, Leeds, they'll always get another chance. Have Salford, and especially in this game with it being so close, can they get back to a final in the near future? Obviously not going to be in the grand final this year.
They can, because they've got a coach that has a way of working that I think players, whoever they are, buy into. The worry, I think, for them would be they need a general. They're a side that has a talisman in the middle of the field, and the likelihood is for the second year running that the 2 people really that run that midfield, Joey Lussick, probably won't be there next year, and Kevin Brown is getting to the point where I don't know how long he's going to go on for, but clearly he's at the end of his career rather than the beginning of it. So that it may well be that having lost 4 finals with 4 different clubs, which is just astonishing when you think about it, and still is so says all the right things, does all the right things. It's an absolute credit to the sport, but you wonder now whether he might put his hand up in the not too distant future and say, you know, that's it for me. That they've got to rebuild again in the key areas of the team. Niall Evans, clearly, who was a candidate for man of the match, with some people who were there. I'm not saying who would have voted for him, but we were asked when the score was only 16 all. But, you know, to come back from a month out and play as well as he did and be a threat every time he touched the ball, he's not going to be there next year either. The worry is not the culture at the club, whatever that means. It's not the coaching at the club. It's not the good people behind the scenes that are trying to garner finance for the club. It's the fact that you've got to constantly change. And one of the things the top teams tend to do is have a core of people that stay the same, and that's where success comes from. So I wouldn't say that they've missed their moment. I have a feeling that 2021 is going to be as disjointed a season as 2020's been, while we all come back to wherever it is we're trying to get to. So they will still have the opportunity, but I just feel sorry for Ian Watson that he has to keep rebuilding. It's too soon. Most clubs rebuild 5 or 6 years along, and obviously if you're going to talk about the impact and effect this might have on Leeds, there are signs that this is a rebuild that's starting to come to fruition. For Salford, they haven't got to the point where each team has a bit of success and they build on it. Each team has a bit of success, it gets pulled apart and they have to build another team.
Yeah, I think no one would have predicted them in another final this year when they lost the reigning man of steel and Josh Jones, a Great Britain international. So the fact that they did get to Wembley is pretty remarkable. And if they're not the lowest spenders in Salford, they're either in Super League, they're either the second lowest, I would say. So, yeah, it is a lot easier to get to a Challenge Cup final than a Super League grand final. You only have to win, 3 games, but still, it's not an easy thing to do. So I think, as Phil said, Ian Watson is the key. If they can keep him at the club, I think they can continue to punch above their weight. He's kind of, I think, the central figure there.
I'm just negative, you see. I still in my mind see Scott Griggs, the ball, and the St Helens player coming at him and think, just boot the sodding thing over the Benidorm flats.
Good to see you've got over it anyway.
Oh yeah. I mean, that and Neil Summers trying 93. Leeds are back though, as I facetiously said at the start of the programme. And I compared it to some of the rugby league media last year when Bradford beat them in the Challenge Cup, and this is the interesting story, isn't it? Bradford are back, all the headlines, Bradford are back. As it turns out, they weren't back. But Leeds have rebuilt and are back. Although I think, Philly, it's a bit early to say, they're back in terms of they're going to win everything and dominate for 10 years. But I sense that's not the story coming out of the club. They know exactly where they are and what still needs to be done.
The interesting thing from the Leeds point of view is that they were just over a year ago. They're now suddenly back ahead of schedule. So I think, although they didn't like using words like transformation and rebuild and all that kind of thing, it was in a worse situation than they'd envisaged. And it got even worse with the David Furner appointment. So whatever the reasons are and who was right and who was wrong with that, whatever he was trying to do, the club didn't feel was going to work, and made, when you look back on it, was a very brave and difficult decision, but turned out to be the right decision. I think the difference is that any sustained period of success has to come with a core of young players, and that core of young players have to learn how to win together, and that normally does take a little bit of time before they do. So in terms of where Leeds are at the moment, you look at the likes of Aledzki and Walker and Handley and Newman when he's back. There are a core of young kids who will have really benefited from that experience of winning something so early on. And that, again, lays the groundwork for where you move on to. So that, for me, the key people on the field were Luke Gale, and Matt Pryor probably didn't get as much credit as he deserved, but it was absolutely outstanding. Adam Cuthbertson, coming off the bench, turned the game around again when it looked like Salford were being ascendant. So I think it's your experienced players that can win you the trophies on the day, but it's the experience gained by the young players to then, when they become the leaders, that keeps it all going. And That's what they achieved on Saturday. That they got to winning a trophy ahead of expectation with a core of kids in there who will absolutely benefit. It wasn't Michalewski's best game. Was put under a lot of media spotlight beforehand. Sent messages from the Polish embassy about good luck. But that experience will be absolutely invaluable for him. Alex Mellor has gone from, again, only just being introduced to the team to winning a medal within sort of a dozen games. Luke Gale's only been there, 13, 14 games. So to have won something, that's really important because that's ingrained in them a little bit now. But it doesn't become a dynasty. There's a chance when there's a lot of young players, and they've got the balance right by the look of it.
I guess, John, one of the areas that I don't say it has to change immediately, but Rob Lewis 30, Luke Gale 32, they won't be there forever, but they can help bring through the younger players in those key positions.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's the best crop of youngsters at Leeds since the Sinfield, Maguire, Burrow edition, which was 2003, 2004, Phil?
Well, yeah, they started coming through in '99, and they were all sort of regular first teamers by about 2002, 2003.
So I think, that's really promising. It's just getting the right players around them, and obviously, as Phil mentioned, Matt Pryor, he's played State of Origin, won a grand final with Cronulla. Cuthbertson's obviously leaving to go to York at the end of the year, but he's been at Leeds for quite a long time, played in a lot of grand finals, won trophies. There is a lot of experience there, and Richie Milo, he's not a natural fullback, but he's made that position his own, and he's a tremendously experienced player. So they have done well in a short time. I think the whole Furner thing, that was a debacle. Let's not mince words. I think Kevin Sinfield went to Gary Hetherington and said it to me or Furner. So the turnaround from that, you have to give them a lot of credit for that. And Richard Agar, I know he's not the most popular coach, particularly with Wakefield and Hull fans, but there's a nice touch there with the history with his dad as a player and then as a coach. He seems a genuinely nice guy. So he's very good with the media. I think he's an intelligent guy, and players seem to warm to his approach, and he's getting the best out of that group.
I think the other person who won't have got the credit he deserves is Sinfield. I mean, you mentioned him then. The amount of criticism he took because of, he's a winner, therefore he will come in and from day one they will win. Clearly, he was the first to admit that the Furner situation was of his making and a massive test of how he handled it. And there aren't too many people that would have admitted a mistake in the first place and could see the way things were going and headed it off at the pass. Particularly when you think that he was brought in to replace somebody who'd been there for 6 years and had been the most successful coach the club had ever had. That is a lot of turmoil to deal with on the management side for somebody who hasn't got experience. So I think if he allowed himself a little smile on the bus back with his kind of, what do they drink, Skol these days, White Stripe. He would be allowed that, but he's not the sort of bloke that's ever going to go public and say, I've done a really good job. That was a really hard period. But I think he deserves an amount of credit because what he instilled with, and you have to have a coach that is going to embody all of that and agree, help carry it out. And I think bringing Jamie Jones-Buchanan onto the staff has helped in this process as well. It's all about deciding what you want to be as a club. And when you've had a lot of success and things start to perhaps be taken for granted in a way that they're not at the beginning, and you start to lose whatever that word culture is, and it's not necessarily to do with players, it's probably just to do with something around a place. When it becomes so familiar, the things that you did to get you to where you got to aren't second nature anymore. You sort of take them for granted. To rebuild that in a relatively short space of time, but stand by your principles throughout, is a measure of the man. And I think that he deserves a lot of credit, which he won't get and he won't seek.
He seems to have become less visible as well recently. I don't know if that's because of social distancing or whatever, but I may have inferred on this programme last year when Agar was still the interim coach and Sir Kev was sat alongside him all the time in the coach's box, who was the organ grinder and who was the monkey? I may have inferred mischievously, but he does appear to have stepped back and disappeared from public view, which is probably as good for him as it is for the club as well.
Definitely. Sorry, Rich.
Well, sometimes I make a good point. I don't know. It doesn't happen often, so sometimes. But he's knighted. He's all right. It's okay. He's not on Strictly Come Dancing though. We can't get any rugby league players on there yet. But
I'm still impressed by your hair as well.
Well, I might just keep this now forever. Though now I'm looking for work. You have to have like certain haircuts and things. It's like what?
Well, they are filming another Mad Max. I think it's a prequel to the more recent Charlie Theroux one, so you could definitely get in as an extra.
You and Mr. Bennett should form a band.
Or just set up another podcast, because there's not enough podcasts out there about anything. Richie Myler, Renaissance man. People still criticise Scully because they didn't actually listen to what he said when he said he wasn't the right signing. As it happens, he's moved to a different position and now he's won the Lansdowne Trophy. Last year they did announce who voted for who on the RFL website, and this year they haven't.
They were going to.
Is there a reason why they didn't? Or?
I think because some of the votes came electronically and some were collected from a little piece of paper handwritten in the stand, that I don't know whether they've actually managed to collate them yet. Not that it matters, because it just proves that we in fact know nothing.
No, I voted for Richie Myler because I thought, well, if he's going to come out anyway, I might as well tell people who I voted for. I was surprised. I don't want to throw our colleagues on the bus that so many people voted for Luke Gale. I assume they all voted after 75 minutes. But I don't know. A worthy winner? Question mark. I think I decided at half time he was the best player on the pitch at half time, and no one did anything in the second half to necessarily change my mind. Although he obviously had a much worse second half than first.
Yeah, I think he was lucky that Leeds won the game, because when he let that ball bounce and Salford scored. And then they scored again. I think if they'd lost that game, you could kind of point to that moment. That was a bad error. You don't let the ball. There seems to be this common thing in rugby league, and you see it in the NRL. People just letting the ball bounce and hoping for the best. I mean, it's kind of schoolboy stuff. You've got to try and take the ball on the full. And that was a huge turning point in the game. Luckily for Myler and Leeds, it didn't cost them a game, but it could have. So I think probably Luke Gale would have been my choice, but as Phil says, you have to vote before the game's actually over, which isn't the best strategy for a man of the match award.
I think again, in his defence of that kick, because presumably we did see it a little bit differently to you, and we didn't have the benefit of 150 replays, but actually Tuilola here miskicked it, and it was a lot shallower than I think anybody had intended, including Lola here. And I think Myler was caught in that two minds of, do I go for it and I'll be out of position, or I'm not going to get to it, so I won't go for it.
He could have got to it if he wanted to. That was you're watching the replay, which obviously he didn't have. He could have got there, and he decided.
But I think his story is the epitome of what we were talking about Leeds and transformation and. Rolling your sleeves up and digging in an unfamiliar position and embodying all the qualities that the management want of you. And it's the typical redemption story. You're told you're not wanted by one set of management and you're not going to be picked and you're never going to play in the position that we had earmarked for. You'd be lucky to come on as an auxiliary hooker. And you just buckle down. The regime changes. You get, because of circumstance, put in a different position, but the only reason you are is because you've shown the right attitude in training, and you've taken all of these things on the chin and responded in the best possible way. And in that respect, his performance and the way he's turned around his Leeds career, which I still think should be reevaluated anyway, and it's something that a certain person who wore a scrum cap occasionally and played for Leeds in the centre and half-back positions won't accept. is the fact that actually he's never given anything other than his absolute very best wherever you put him, whatever the circumstances are, and that's what's turned it around. It's not just about your talent; it's about your willingness to do stuff for your teammates. And so, in that respect, I think he is the right person because he embodies all of that. But as you say, in terms of who had the mightiest impact on the game, irrespective of who actually won it, I just thought Niall Evalds coming back from injury was fantastic for Salford. And actually, in some respects, if it could have been Myler's fault if the Leeds had lost, him catching that chip over from Evalds early on in the game may even have won them the match. So I think it does balance them out. That was a brilliant piece of anticipation and a great bit of skill that he saw and dealt with and diffused. So no problem with him winning it.
It's a funny thing too that obviously if Toronto hadn't gone bust, he would be playing at Toronto next year. Leeds didn't want him, or they didn't want to give him a new contract. But now he's staying at Leeds and he's making the most of it and doing really well. And then also you look at Callum Watkins, the only reason he's at Salford is because Toronto went bust and, that was the best deal he could get. And obviously there's that link. He's from the area. He grew up a Salford fan. So, yeah, it's funny how things can work out, isn't it?
It is. Now you've mentioned them, is there anything else to mention on the Challenge Cup final that I've obviously missed?
Well, there was, I'll just say there's one thing, I'm not sure if either of you said it, there's a press release that came through not long ago that the final attracted the biggest domestic TV audience for the final since 2002 and an increase of more than 50% on last year's final. And it goes on, and it mentions with an aggregate of almost 6 million viewers, but it doesn't actually give you any figures, which is what I've actually gone back to ask what was the average audience. But I mean, it is obviously good. The TV audience was strong, and maybe there's 50, 60,000 people who weren't going to be there watching as well. Maybe it's the Salford kind of the Salford bandwagon effect, because obviously the grand final last year, I think that was the biggest TV audience, was it ever, in history of the grand final? Or it was certainly one. So, maybe there's, it goes to show that some new teams, some new faces in can have a bit more of a widespread appeal.
I think it shows that terrestrial television is a must, and for all of the fact that the Challenge Cup maybe does need some polishing and love and attention and care, and moving it back to July was the first right step. It's nobody's fault that it ended up being in October. We have had a spread of teams in the Challenge Cup. So, Castleford hadn't been for a while, Hull KR, Hull had never won at Wembley. We've now had Salford there. What the Challenge Cup has at the moment, for all its faults, is what the grand final doesn't. And I think, seamlessly linking into the NRL grand final, what people will be really interested to watch on Sunday is, Penrith are there. And this time last year, Penrith were 10th. If you'd have drawn up the runners and riders of who was likely to be in a grand final this year, they wouldn't have been amongst it. If you're a neutral fan, you've got a passing interest in a sport, but you're not overly, committed to a team, then something like that will have you tuning in. And I think you're right that was the Salford angle. I think clearly the Rob Burrow angle was the other one, and I cannot commend him enough for allowing the BBC breakfast cameras to be with him for the year, because that's bravery and courage almost above and beyond what he showed on the pitch, to allow yourself to be seen, in the hope that it will create sufficient awareness for those that come after you to maybe more research to develop a cure. That is unbelievable. I think that touched the whole of the nation. I mean, to see football players who I've never heard of before tweeting about Rob and his condition, and for everybody who was interviewed to be referencing it back to Rob, for him to cleverly be the guest of honour in absentia, which meant you could keep talking about him, and even for those clips of breakfast telly that came out after the game where his kids are rejoicing, and all of that. I think if it hadn't had a major impact on interest in the game, then clearly then there would have been very little hope for rugby league. But I just think all of the ingredients were there to make it as special as it could be in the circumstances.
And the coverage seems to have gone down positively with everyone, which is, always good. So, it makes a change. Depends on what I've written in my column. It might be slightly different to what everyone else thinks, but I would say that one, Mike. Where do we go next? Do you want to talk about the NRL Grand Final or Toronto? Because I guess we don't really know much about Toronto anyway.
I've got a Grand Final themed T-shirt for you guys. If you can see it, you can maybe guess where it's from or which Grand Final. No.
Lords of something. Grog.
Do you know who the person is on the skateboard, Rich?
I mean, it looks like Mal Meninga, but I'm guessing it's not Mal Meninga.
No, it's Andrew Johns from 1997.
Well, I guess with the hat, he must be Newcastle.
Yeah, famous photo after they beat Manly, and he may have had a couple of drinks, and he was skateboarding down the main street of Newcastle with his shirt off, and I think 2 beers in each. So yeah, a bit of Grand Final themed costume for it.
But that was the year it was only half a Grand Final.
Yeah, but
doesn't really count.
That was the greatest Grand Final ever, Phil. That actually was the greatest Grand Final. And I can say that even as a Manly fan, and we lost in the last 6 seconds. Not that I'm bitter or I haven't gotten over it. Yes, and we were robbed because Adam McDougall should have been sent off for using Jeff Tooby's head as a driveway. But yeah, not that I'm bitter. No, the Grand Final, it should be, as Phil said, I mean, there's a bit of romance, a bit of the fairy tale element about Penrith. Nearly all of them are local juniors. Penrith have always been a kind of unfashionable club. They've only ever won 2 Grand Finals in, was it the late 60s, early 70s they came in? And it's a very working class area. So, yeah, it's good to see. They've lost 1 game all year, which is remarkable. And I think they lost that game by 6 points. So it's some feat. And then also on the other side of things, you've got the whole Cameron Smith, will he, won't he retire? Is he the GOAT? So there's a bit of magic there.
No, he's not the GOAT, is he? Because he's not.
He's not actually a GOAT. He's a human being.
No. Was it in the paper or is it in the? Well, did you just put it online yesterday? There's many things to talk about in the League Express, especially on the letters page. After the Wakefield Salford St Helens game, rather, on Friday or Thursday, I don't care. Thursday, wasn't it? Christian Wolf, coach of St Helens, coach of Tonga, a man who knows lots about rugby league, was asked to compare Cameron Smith, alleged GOAT, and James Roby from St Helens, actual GOAT, because James Roby has scored 100 tries and Cameron Smith only scored 46 in the NRL. So get back, Smith. Get back. James Roby scored more tries. He's better than you.
I mean, I don't want to get into an argument with you, Rich, but I'd say probably Cameron Smith's 2 World Cup trophies.
No. He scored 100 tries.
Origin Series wins. And,
no.
Yeah. It's all about try scoring. Well, Martin Afire is the greatest player of all time, isn't he?
Let's just forget all the goals he's kicked as well. How many goals has Roby kicked? I mean, the other thing is, I think.
How many times has Roby been sin bin? Because I think Cameron Smith's only been sin bin once, but it was last year. That was the funniest thing ever when he was kind of shocked. He was like, "How can I be sin binned?" And the way he had to be ushered off the field at Cronulla because he was like, "This is unfair. How can I?"
He's checking his contract, going, I think you'll find there's a clause in there that says, I rule this, I run this game on and off the field.
I am the referee.
Yeah.
I have to say that in terms of comparison, it's very difficult, and across the different eras when the rules have changed and full time against part time, all that, it's a thankless task. But what I would say is, of this current, maybe last 15, 20 years, where the game has probably, we've called it Super League over here, and it's reached some heights over there. I would say Cameron Smith is the best player I've seen of this modern era, and I don't think there's any doubt about that. The number of games he's controlled, and the big games that he has won, and the decisions that he makes, and the speed with which he gets the ball away from the play, the ball, all of that, he epitomises to me everything about the modern rugby league player. I don't think there's been anybody better than him consistently. The interesting thing, I think, is what John hinted at in his preview, is that you've got two very different models of how to build a rugby league club in this final, and it sort of does relate to Toronto in a little bit. You've got the expansion area that can't rely on local players because they don't exist, but nonetheless are incredibly successful and carry a big fan base with them for being successful. And let's not forget, Melbourne have spent, was it the last month and a half in Queensland, and have been
more than a month and a half. I think it's 3 or 4 months.
So, and they're popular among the locals on the Sunshine Coast. It's not like anybody's saying, "Oh, well," you can imagine Toronto were based in Dewsbury. The locals don't take them to their heart. And that hasn't happened. You know, Melbourne are accepted for being a great team wherever their players come from. And you know, talking of stories, the Justin Olam story is as good as any. That the whole of Papua New Guinea, every Highland village will be up watching whatever telly they can get in front of, because he means so much to them. They don't care who he plays for. They don't care whether it's a traditional Sydney team or an expansion side in Melbourne. They will just be absolutely screaming their heads off for him to do well. And you compare that to Penrith, where success has been monitored by the amount of juniors that have come through their system that often have gone on and played for other clubs and had really successful careers. But if they can keep this group together, and it looks like, I think most of them have re-signed again. They'll always lose a couple and they'll bring a couple in. It's a great contrast, and neither is right and neither is wrong. And when you look at all of the bringing Toronto back, let's just look at, have they got the money? And let's forget everything else, because everything else fits. That, you know, it doesn't matter that they don't have Canadian players at the moment. There aren't Canadian players they could have. It doesn't matter that they play on in another market. The sport needs another market. It doesn't matter that they bought in 10,000 fans. They are all really good things that the sport needs. To me, it's purely down to, does the bloke who wants to take them over have the money? And if he does, you have to let them in, and the model is Melbourne.
Who's going to win on? Well, no. Before we get on, who's going to win? Who are the or where are the key battles for those of us who don't watch the NRL, but will tune in on Sunday, because there's nothing else better to do at 8:30 in the morning than watch the Melbourne Storm versus the Penrith Panthers. I would kind of, like, not knowing anything, pitch this game as Penrith being the Salford of things, but as you say, they've had such a great season that they're almost St Helens of last year. Only losing one game is an amazing achievement, regardless of the situation.
Yeah, you could say they're kind of a Salford or a Wakefield or a Castleford, because, as I said, they've never been a rich club. They are actually, funnily enough, reasonably rich now, because they have a massive workers club, and it brings in a lot of pokey money. And I actually went out there in 2016 when Zach Hardacre was there, and saw their centre of excellence, and it's just amazing. The facilities that they've got there are world class. But the funny thing about that area in Sydney, it's, so far from the beach, is that there's probably two things to do, and that's, well, maybe three: play rugby league, drink, and gamble. So I think they have that benefit, that rugby league is a religion out there. And as you said, there's so many players. You look at Wade Graham at Cronulla, he's a Penrith boy. Luke Lewis, who won a grand final at Penrith and then went to Cronulla. Blake Austin, Akaloa as well. They're all Penrith. They produce so many players. Tim Sheens is another, ex Penrith player and coach. Phil Gould. You can go on and on. So,
Steve-O.
Sorry.
Steve-O.
Yes, Steve-O. Well, apparently Phil Gould made his debut because he was replacing the end of Steve-O's career as a hooker. Brad Fittler, Greg Alexander. There's lots of great names. So it's a proper diehard rugby league area, Penrith. And the fact is, it's quite remarkable that Phil Gould came in I think it was 8 years ago, and he the club was was a bit of a basket case. They needed to restructure, and he reorganised all their pathways. And then you look at the success they've had through the under-20s and the reserve grade. They've won grand final after grand final. All these players now are in the first team. But he actually sacked Ivan Cleary, what was it, in 2014. And then, he sacked another coach, Anthony Griffin. They brought Ivan Cleary back, and then him and Phil Gill and Ivan Cleary fell out. But Ivan Cleary's now, got Penrith into a grand final. So I think Phil Gill did some good things. He probably did some bad things. But it is a victory for, as Phil said, their investment in their own academy and their development in their local juniors, because they've only got a handful of players that they've picked up from other clubs, Api Coruscant, Kikau, and obviously they lost James Maloney, a great player who went to Catalans, and Jerome Luai's kind of come from nowhere and is just a phenomenon at the moment. It's different to see such a young team playing so well and with so much confidence, and they really seem to enjoy each other's company. And there's a real strong Samoan. I think there's 4 or 5 Samoan eligible players in there, and they seem to have a really tight bond as well. So it's been enjoyable watching them play. No one would get this season. As Phil said, they came 10th last year. They lost James Maloney, an Origin half and a grand final winner, and they've just, been unbelievable.
They even have a Brit in their team of legends, according to Wikipedia, the great Bill Ashurst.
I have to say, if you're looking for matchups, and they may not directly confront each other during the game, because it's going to depend whether particularly one of them starts on the bench or not. But if you're not excited to see Nelson Asafa Solomona on one side and Billy Kikau on the other, then you don't love rugby league, because they embody and epitomise everything for me. Asafa Solomona is one of the most exciting running players, the hardest to stop. He's been coming off the bench a little bit, but can change a game. And Kikau is just running just slightly wider off the likes of Nathan Cleary and Jerome Luai. He's and again, when he goes up for a high ball, he epitomises everything. And their stories are great as well, where they come from and who they might be. The other thing is, let's link this to the World Cup. So let's have a reason for watching it over here in the relatively early hours of Sunday morning. There's going to be lots of stars that we're watching that are going to be featuring for nations other than Australia, New Zealand or England. So the Samoans, the Tongans, the Fijians, the Papua New Guineans, they've all got major representatives in this final, and get to know these people, because you're going to be seeing them, in your back garden soon, and that is really exciting.
You're forgetting the Kiwis, Phil. I think
still got some memories of 2013. I'd like to forget the Kiwis.
Melbourne's success over the years has been built obviously on Queenslanders. They've picked up Queensland players from the Queensland Cup or not wanted. Cameron Smith, for example, Billy Slater, Cooper Cronk, Greg Inglis, although they did pluck him from New South Wales, but and Queensland and New Zealanders. Sorry, so you've got the 2 Bromwich brothers, Kenny and Jesse, who are outstanding players. You've got Nelson and Sofa Solomon. You've got Brandon Smith. In the past they've had Stephen Kearney. They've had lots of great Kiwi players, so they're very good at recruiting from there. Jerome Hughes, obviously at fullback, almost forgot to mention him. I mean, at halfback. He was a fullback last year, and they've converted him. I think he's been sacked or let go by 2 other NRL clubs. He's just a phenomenal player. I mean, I think last week he set up 2 tries. He had 2 line break assists, a couple of tackle breaks. But in terms of battles, I think probably Ryan Pappenhausen and Dylan Edwards at the back. I mean, Pappenhausen, he's a touch footy player. I think he was playing in the Australian touch footy national team with Kalen Ponga 5 years ago. And 18 months ago, no club wanted him. West Tigers let him go, which is another. West Tigers are so good at recruitment and management. They let him go, and he was the 4th choice fullback at Melbourne. And now, he's probably going to be in the Origin. Well, he'll be in the greatest squad. He might make his Origin debut. He's playing in a grand final. He's just an unbelievable player with speed that you just can't you can't stop.
The Flying Dutchman.
And it Phil, but yeah.
It could be Josh Addo-Carr's last game. Obviously, he's been a fantastic advert for the sport, as well as being an astonishing player. The Fox, rumoured to be going to A team in Sydney at the end of this, but who knows, if he wins another grand final with Melbourne, he might be tempted to stay. But I just think it's got everything. There is no favourite, because you would say the experience of Melbourne should probably make them favourites, but every time in this season Penrith have been backed against, they found a way to win. And they play such intense football in the open 20 minutes of a game. There was some ridiculous stat that in all bar one of the games, they've been nilled their opponent at half time. That just says something about how well prepared they are. Just sit back, get a couple of mugs of coffee on and some toast, and don't forget the clocks go back an hour, so don't get up an hour after it started. If you can, get up at 5 a.m. and watch the women's grand final as well, where Brisbane will actually win something this year, and it should be fantastic. And the fact that Nathan Cleary didn't get the Dally M probably just gives him that little bit extra to perhaps stamp his mark on the game. And again, that father and son thing's fantastic, isn't it? Because isn't it the last time Penrith won? Was it John Lang and Martin were together in the ranks? So again, history does repeat itself.
And just to remind you, Phil, too, that Ivan Cleary's from the Northern Beaches and is a ex-Manly player. But just on that, on that, Phil, what did you make of and Rich? What did you make of Nathan Cleary not getting the Dally M? I mean, don't get me wrong, I think Jack White is a great player and had some terrific performances, but Canberra finished 5th. Penrith finished 1st, lost one game all year, and he was, their best player throughout the season. I know he had the TikTok thing, telling a bit of fibs with his TikTok dancing, but surely that's the wrong call.
Well, I mean, whose fault is it? Whose fault? Who do we blame?
I think
Rupert Murdoch.
Yeah. I think there was a lot of blame being dished out because the Daily Telegraph accidentally published the result, because we know about embargoes and the rugby league beta. There's never, but yeah, no, I just think that was a bit of a gaffe, shall we say? But I think they got all the other awards. I think Harry Grant, Rookie of the Year. He's the next Cameron Smith that Melbourne have got. And I saw yesterday that they were thinking about sending him to Super League this year to get more games instead of the West Tigers. I mean, wouldn't it be good to see him? Yeah.
Under the new rules, he would have destroyed this competition.
Yeah, I mean, he was leading, or he was up the top of the Dally M early in the season. I mean, he's only a 22-year-old kid with 15 games. He's just a freak of a player. So it's quite nice for Melbourne that even if Cameron Smith does retire, they've got Harry Grant there. They've also got Brandon Smith, the New Zealand Test hooker, who can play a bit. So talk about an embarrassment of riches.
Would that be the Harry Grant of which suburb of Melbourne does he come from?
I think the one from far north Queensland, yeah.
Which again, let's stop getting hung up about where players come from. Let them just entertain us.
Without going old Joel Kane on you, Cameron Smith is $4 favourite to win the Clive Churchill Medal. Nathan Cleary $4.50. Ryan Pappenhausen $9. I don't know how these Australian odds work. They're all very confusing. Melbourne the favourites though to win the grand final, 2-point favourites with the bookies in Australia. But do gamble responsibly, as you always say at the end of those things on the NRL, which is good. So who is going to win, Melbourne or Penrith?
I think I'm not much of a gambler, much of a bettor, but I think if you're gonna have a bet, probably the more the odds would fall towards Melbourne, just because they're basically in the grand final nearly every year. They've got more experienced players. They've got more Origin players, more Test players. They've been there and done it before, and if it is Cameron Smith's last game, then those players are going to run through, brick walls to make sure he finishes as a winner, and he always seems to win. That's why quite disliked by a lot of people in Australia, not just just because he just wins. He just, whenever he's there, he just manages to find a way to win, whether it's club, state, or, as you two know, for his country. And most of the times, I think he's won more tests for the Kangaroos than anyone else, or something, Phil, hasn't he?
Yeah, something like that. He's certainly captained them, I think, in more tests than anybody else. Again, it might help Penrith that the ground won't be full. There'll still be a fantastic atmosphere with, I think they're hoping to be 40,000 people in there, although the way Ticket Tech seems to be working at the moment, just turn up and get in for nothing. And that might help, because I think, if 80,000 and that really oppressive atmosphere, and if you're not played in that kind of thing before, it can affect you. I think that works to Penrith's advantage. My only worry for them would be the way in which Melbourne started the game this week, the semi-final, because they absolutely blew Souths away. Canberra, and that's where you look at teams hitting form at the right time. And I just think the worry for a side going into a final that produced that level of quality for the first, 15-20 minutes. They must have had 80% of the possession, and the 20% they didn't have, it was Canberra were on their own line. It was almost watching the perfect game, and if they can reproduce that, then that will put Penrith under pressure that they haven't been put under too often this season, and that's when you find out, in a big game, how players cope with it. But I think this is one way we don't care who wins. Let's just entertain us regally at breakfast on Sunday.
I think one thing in Penrith's advantage too is that Melbourne, I think, have got to fly in on the Saturday from Queensland and then basically stay in their hotel for the 24 hours until game time. So they're basically quarantined. So, you'd think Penrith, not far travel from Toyota, from whatever they call it now, Oak Stadium, whatever it used to be, from out west to Homebush is not far. So it's those little things can make a difference, I think. But Melbourne's experience, it's pretty priceless in those grand finals.
Watch out for Stephen Crichton. I have no idea who is going to win the man of the match, but if you're talking about kids that have made an impact on a season this year in either hemisphere, he is as good as anything I've seen this year, and he's 19, maybe just 20.
20. I think, yeah, 20.
He has been week in, week out. Normally you say, oh well, he's a young kid, he'll have a little blip during the season and he might come back at the end. He's been consistently absolutely brilliant, and Melbourne don't have a weakness, but they haven't had a settled centre combination this year. And if I was looking for a guy that might exploit that, get the ball to Crichton as often as you can.
Just on that, Phil. I mean, you remember Dean Farray,
one of my favourite players.
Yeah, I mean, he can't get in the team because Crichton and Naden have been playing so well, and Tyrone Main. So that goes to show, when you've got a New Zealand representative, a world class centre like Dean Farray who can't get a run, you go show the strength that the Penrith have got in their team.
A Brisbane-Melbourne double then, it seems, on Sunday morning. Something to enjoy from down under. Well, the Australian Grand Final, obviously we know what's going to happen there. The NRL Grand Final, I should say. Our Grand Final looks like it's not going to be at Old Trafford because, well, A, there's not going to be anyone in, so it's pointless paying to hire out Old Trafford. And B, Man United have got to play some games or something.
Let's have it at Bellevue. No, yeah, as long as it's not at Hull. I mean, no one wants to go to Hull. So either Huddersfield or Leeds. And let's be honest, Huddersfield or Leeds won't be in the grand final this year. Sorry, Phil. But yeah, I think Huddersfield or Leeds would make sense.
I think if it's Saints Warrington, you'd struggle to bring it over to Yorkshire, but it makes perfect sense not to have it at Old Trafford. I think that the difference at Wembley is clearly you're on terrestrial television, that there is all of the associated history surrounding that. If the grand final on Sky is going to get the same 200,000 people that view it, that will tune in every year. It's not going to make a huge amount of difference in terms of added value, if you like, where you play it, in which case take as much expense out of it as you can. Play it at a ground that I mean, the reason Headingley would make sense, or St Helens, or possibly Warrington, is that those grounds are available. And one of the issues with Old Trafford is clearly Manchester United might not make it available because they've got quite a lot of games to fit in, or you're going to have the same issue at Huddersfield. I know they're not in the same division or in Europe, but clearly you don't have priority over that stadium because there's a football team playing there. So I would say that the likelihood is, looking at the fixtures that you've got to cram in between now and the end of the season, that Leeds aren't going to be in it. The best I think they could hope for would be to be fourth, but I suspect that quite a lot of teams got 4 games in 10 days coming up, and that is going to be so difficult to manage. And when it's done on win percentage ratios, it's almost impossible to not only predict but to actually change too much of where the table is at the moment. So I suspect an outset at Headingley, it's as secure as environment as you could imagine. It's got all the media access that you need. It's relatively easy to get to. The only thing you would say was, if it was Saints and Warrington or Wigan, would they want to come over here? But you might, you might end up then playing at somebody's home ground, which again, you don't want a grand final to be decided on a home ground.
It's a bit like the darts. I know people love it when I compare everything to darts. They've had the World Grand Prix and the World Match Play have been on recently, and they were held, I think, in Milton Keynes in front of a big screen and no one there. And the Premier League darts finals as well. But the World Championships, it looked like they're going to be at Alexandra Palace when there's, however many people are allowed in or not, just because it's the World Championships and it has to be in that prestigious venue like Wembley for the Challenge Cup final. I'm not saying the grand final isn't prestigious, but in terms of saving money and everything in this strangest of years, blah blah blah, it doesn't really matter. You're still going to be champions, just going to be champions not quite at Old Trafford. If you haven't got Old Trafford, you can go do the tour at another point in the future. It'll be open for business. It'll be all right. You might get there for the World Cup final next year. Fingers crossed, as we count down to that tournament. I'm trying to think of any other news that's gone on this week. I know we haven't spoken about the games in Super League, but the ones that happened last week seem to have been a long time ago now. I guess we should touch on Hull versus Castleford. Andy Lass picking up his first win in charge of Hull in Hull. He's been in charge for years now, but it's his first game at the KCOM. And they absolutely battered Castleford on Sunday, John. 24-0 at half-time, 48-6 by full-time. A very good performance from Hull, I assume.
It was, but I think that Castleford performance is the worst performance I've seen from any team for a while. Basically, Castleford kicked off. Hull had a set. They kicked the ball, kicked it to Gareth O'Brien. He picked up the ball with one hand. He went in, go into contact, but dropped the ball before the tackle. And then Hull scored off that set. And then basically, Castleford didn't have the ball for the first 10 minutes. And some of their defensive efforts were woeful. Hull looked slick at times, but they weren't playing against a particularly good team. And it's Castleford's 5th loss in a row, so there's a lot of pressure and heat on Darryl Powell, which I can understand. But I think what he's done at the club since he came in from Featherstone 7 years ago, he definitely deserves some time and a bit of respect. Because obviously, while this season, I think as Phil said, this season is a very unusual season, and I think any push to get him sacked or removed is a bit far-fetched.
What we shouldn't forget either is it's only just over a week and a half ago that Castleford didn't have enough players to raise a team. So, clearly there's very little training going on. There's very little combinations there. Jake Truman's been out for a while, comes back in the team, but clearly doesn't yet look comfortable in that he can't possibly be fit in the conventional sense of the word. My bigger worry for Castleford would be Danny Orr leaving. I think that the golden triumvirate of coaching was having those 3 half-backs together, Ryan Sheridan, Danny Orr and Darryl Powell, and that meant that they played a certain way, and the philosophy was, attack. Clearly, you can't do that unless you've got a really good defence. But they were so inventive with those three at the helm, and one of those three leaves. You just think, I wonder if that's a signal of something, not being quite right. Clearly, everybody's looking at Costa at the moment, and it may well be that Danny is ready to be a head coach somewhere, and good luck to him if he is. He's, again, fantastically respected in the game, and he will be looking for an opportunity at some point. But just wonder whether that signals a slight changing of the guard at Castleford. And we can't, Hull started the season round one with a victory where everybody said, oh, they're going to win the competition. And then the rules changed and COVID came in, and then they came out and went, oh, Hull are rubbish, so they're not going to win anything. And they have one good win against a team that had an off day, and suddenly now they're going to be a late charge for the top four. We've said it a number of times while we've been doing these podcasts, there is no form line. What goes in one week will not be replicated the next week. We haven't yet, as we're recording, heard what the latest COVID situation is. We don't know suddenly if some team hasn't trained all week. We don't know if 3 players are going to have to stand down because they've tested positive, or another 8 will because they've been in contact with somebody. And all of that means you cannot prepare. You can't really be consistent. And we've now got a ridiculous schedule of games coming up for a lot of teams, and they're going to have to make some decisions as to when they play their kids, and which games they decide to play their kids may even determine the results of those games. So, doing predictions at the moment is without access to literally knowing an hour before what the teams are, is a complete waste of time.
It is. That's why I can't be bothered doing them.
But seriously, I mean, when you look at what Castleford have got to do, what Hull KR, what Leeds have got to do, what Wakefield have got to do, how can you possibly predict? I couldn't tell you now whether Leeds going to St Helens on Friday are going to say, I'll tell you what, we'll reward all of the top line players. It's a team that's already in the top 4. Not only do we need the points percentage, but we need to take something off them as well. We're really going to go for this. Or whether they say, well, we've got Castleford on Monday, who are struggling a little bit. We've got Wakefield twice in 3 days at the end of that week. We'd hope to win maybe 1, possibly 2. We'll go for we'll win 3 out of 4. So we'll play all the kids at say. So, how can you predict what the results are going to be if you don't know how that's going to work out? So whoever gets in the top 4 will have deserved it. Whoever doesn't, thank you for keeping the season going. Take the heat off any coach. Wakefield have a decent display. Chris Chester's fine. Wakefield have a poor display. Chris Chester needs to go. Just forget it. This year, just forget it. Cut everyone the slack that they need and deserve, and hopefully we'll all emerge, and every team will be fine for next year in a 12-team competition, whoever that 12th team may be.
Ottawa. It's an interesting difference in the way the coaches reacted to defeats and heavy defeats. In terms of Chris Chester on Thursday, not being impressed with his players. Darryl Powell yesterday, in fact, it was the exact same scoreline, wasn't it? 48-6. Talking about the fact that they put the effort in but weren't good enough. It's interesting which approach works going forward.
I think also you can't come out and slam your players in the press after a game, every game that they lose. I mean, if you're a player and you hear that constantly, mentally you're going to switch off, or put the proverbial 2 fingers up to your coach. I think sometimes you need to be you need to put an arm around them. Sometimes you might need a hairdryer. Sometimes it's a different approach. And I think also these days in the modern world, you can't go around bollocking people or players, and expect the right reaction. So I think Darryl Powell was very, very measured and pretty honest in what he said after the game. And as Bill said, they're literally having one training session before games at the moment. And it was Daddy Richardson and Jake Truman's first game back. So I think you've got to take that into factor. But just on St Helens, I mean, that was probably the best St Helens performance of the season. They were electric. Tommy Makinson back at his best, and James Roby, etc. So I think that's a tall ask for any team when you come up against the best team in the country.
James Roby.
And when you play them twice in 4 days, and clearly they're smarting about the way they played the first time. These are really unusual times. We went into this season pre-COVID. You remember those days? Long time ago. Saying, isn't it great that player welfare has been recognised, and we're going to drop the Easter Monday game, and players are only going to play once a week, and now because of what we are where we are, and we had this debate a month ago saying I still think if a game isn't going to be featured on Sky, we should just be dropping it from the schedules at the moment and looking after the players. But you look at what they've got to do from here on in. And good luck predicting any game, because I just want everybody to come through it without serious injury, and if it means that some young kids get some experience, great. If it means that some people are going to win medals at the end of November, great. But let's not get too hung up about any of this at the moment.
I mean, what a great day of rugby league we've got then on Sunday. We've got the NRLW Grand Final. We've got the NRL Grand Final, followed by the bottom 2 teams in Super League on the Hour League app at 2 o'clock. I hope I don't have to mute it as Wakefield take on Hull KR. At least I've got my code. I can watch it from the benefit of my own home if I can plug it into the telly properly. Fixtures this week: Cass Hull KR on Thursday, followed by Huddersfield versus Wakefield. Those all in St Helens, of course. Catalans versus Hull in Catalan. Wigan, Salford and Saints Leeds on Friday. Sunday, Wakefield Hull KR. Monday, Salford versus St Helens and Leeds versus Cass at Headingley, and Catalans versus Warrington again in the south of France. And this is the big weekend for the Catalans and their top 4 hopes, which is, I think, a point we've made before on the programme. And certainly when you look at Leeds' situation, they've won the Challenge Cup now, they're on the verge of the top 4, but Catalans do have home advantage with fans, which may or may not be crucial. At least Leeds have got the trophy in the back pocket now. Catalans just need to get to that 15-game point, John, and qualify for the playoffs that way as well.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully they don't implode in the semi-finals as they have done since Jesus was baby. It'd be good. I think that would be a good story for Catalans to get through to the grand final. We had the Salford story last year, didn't we? And I think that would be epic. But I think it's probably going to be a St Helens / Wigan / Warrington final. But I'd love to be proved wrong, as always.
Well, Catalan are now saying that the game that was called off at Wigan is now unlikely to be replayed because there isn't the space in the schedule. So that's actually one less away game against a team that are above them in the league, and you ideally now want to be playing teams below you in the league to get your win percentage up. So maybe it has broken well for the Dragons, and of course League Express proposing that maybe the grand final should be played in France.
Why?
Okay.
Because they can have fans.
But can anyone travel to France, or do you have to quarantine?
You'd have to quarantine, but there's going to be nobody going from here anyway. So, there you go.
Matt Horton's in Greece. So,
Yeah, but we don't know if he's coming back in. I'm making arrangements with the Greek embassy that he isn't allowed to.
Hopefully he's been deported. Grand final in France. Yeah, if that was a St Helens Wigan grand final, it's getting played in France. Can you imagine the Eamon McManus wasn't happy about a refereeing decision in a final. I can imagine his comments about it.
Jesus obviously would have been a Wakefield supporter because we're a church team, so that's the good news there. Although they say he moves in mysterious ways. He certainly bloody has done for the last 50 years.
You've never heard of Parramatta G? He's a Parramatta fan. He used to go to all the games at Parramatta Stadium, Rich. I'll send you some info about Parramatta Jesus. So.
Bethlehem Bears looking to get into Super League alongside the Pions of Pyongyang.
I think it was the guy outside Widnes who always used to have that banner saying the Jesus saves. He was always there.
Not the end of not the end is neither. That was well, it could be. Who's off to Widnes anyway? Seeing as everyone's been linked with the Widnes job, and I'm not sure anyone's that bothered.
Everyone's going to Widnes. Well, I think it's a part-time job, isn't it? So, I know there was the statement from the RFL. Was it yesterday or the day before?
Yes.
We're going to have another meeting because we've had a meeting and then we'll have a meeting about the meeting. But no, in all seriousness and in fairness to the RFL, it is a very hard situation because you can't have crowds in stadiums. And I spoke to a couple of clubs, and one said that they think 90% of Championship and League One clubs would go bust if they have to play without any crowd. So it doesn't really make any sense to be playing without crowds. So if that's April, that's April.
I suspect that there will be a further government bailout aimed specifically at clubs in the Championship and League One. I think there's a lot of lobbying going on. And in terms of the amount of money it would take overall compared to a lot of other industries that would need a lot more to keep them going, I think there is a case for saying that you could start in March to give the competition the integrity that it needs, because it can't be extended this year. It's got to finish in time for the World Cup. So you might have to play a month behind closed doors, but that month would be part funded by a government grant rather than a loan. So I think all of that's going on in the background, and hopefully Championship Rugby League can restart sort of March time, and maybe if it has to begin in the worst of circumstances, that we can get back up in April to people coming in the ground. Because the other thing as well, with the greatest respect to most of those clubs, is they probably would only attract or need about 1,000 fans to get them up and running and going, and that you can socially distance virtually in any Championship or League One ground. So I think there is some work being done, and I again endorse what John was saying about taking my hat off to the RFL at the moment. They have an absolutely thankless, impossible task. They're not going to get everything right, but anybody who is involved in any form of business at the moment, you cannot plan beyond what you're doing this afternoon. So to be making decisions about what a competition might look like in 3 or 4 months' time, to put on the Wembley that they did, and I have to say the logistics behind the scenes were fantastically well done. To make as much capital out of that on social media, and obviously to get the right message out there, to link that into what the World Cup are now doing. I think tickets going on general sale at the end of this week. I can't commend them enough. There will be opportunities, I'm sure, where people will say, you didn't do this right, you didn't do that right, you could have made this decision, you could have made that decision. But where we are at the moment, and I think the lobbying that is going on to get more funding into the sport, they're doing a great job.
Certainly are. I just need to contact the government to see if they can bail out podcasters at some point in the future.
You need to get some kind of male grooming company to get in touch. At the very least, they can pay for you to have a decent shaven haircut.
I'm awaiting a reply. What was I going to say about the Championship League? Oh yeah, we talk about hardships going on at the moment. What about the England women's performance squad who met up last week? Some of the players from Lancashire having to wear Yorkshire shirts to play in.
Good.
Talk about hardship.
Beginning of the conversion. Quite right. See the light.
Congratulations to Leeds, of course, who now hold the men's, women's and wheelchair Challenge Cups all at the same time. Somewhat fortuitously, but it's still in the books. It's still a record.
Well, it's still in the cabinet. What I would say is, going back to Championship and League One very briefly, if I was wearing a hat, I would now be taking it off to North Wales Crusaders, because again, there are times where the impact of doing something is greater than actually seeing it done. And again, to have the halfback partnership next year of Rangi Chase and Gavin Henson, that's great PR. The game needs that kind of PR, and full credit to West Wales for pulling off the coup. Did I?
Yeah. All the millions of Welsh listeners are
they'll be playing at North Wales. Go along and see them when they do.
The Flat Earth Society.
But yeah, West Wales' recruitment, fantastic.
I do hope we don't end up like football, where club chairmen say, "Oh, we'd like lots of money from the government because we're skint," and then sign lots of players for lots of money, and then again claim poverty, because that would never happen in the past. Never happen again in the future, obviously.
It is a weird world though at the moment, where you can sit and watch the NRL semi-finals or whatever, and there's crowds there and there's atmosphere, and then you're in the UK and it's very different. But thanks to Boris and his exceptional leadership as usual.
we can go watch non-league football and some theatre performances, but it's seemingly only theatre in London and not in the provinces, where, they haven't really... We can't get into politics because people will get upset. So the good news is there will be a special podcast later this week, fingers crossed, with a Challenge Cup winner, so stay tuned for that. John, is there anything you'd like to promote? I know. Are you on any other podcasts apart from your own this week?
Who knows, Rich? It's early in the week. But yes, you can always go and follow and download By the Balls. We had Paul Rowley on last week. He was very good on, obviously, Salford and the culture there and working with Ian Watson. He was also very good on his time at Toronto and then, the job there and I guess the future of Toronto, which should be decided on Friday, I suppose.
We'll have to get a guest on about that next week. We won't do a podcast until Tuesday next week because there's no point doing one on Monday when there's games on Monday afternoon. Not that the games are relevant at the moment, I guess. I don't know. It's just talking. Just talking, filling people's days up. Here's 80 minutes to fill up your day while you do something else. While we're on, if you're in tier 3 or tier 2 or no tiers at all, I don't know. Is there any tiers in Greece? We'll have to ask Matt when he comes back. Apart from that cockerel that wakes him up in the morning. Phil, the new magazine is out. It's officially out. It's on screen here somewhere.
In the shops.
That are open.
It has some wonderful contributors. What more can I say?
I'm looking forward to see what I've edited out because I've not seen yet. But so that I know I can repeat next month or not. Phil, thank you much for your time. John, likewise. And to pay tribute to a great man who's retiring this week in Harry Gratian. As I say, like, share, subscribe, do all the things you're supposed to do. Enjoy your rugby league. Pause, turn to the camera. We do.